And that's where all the big learning and lessons come from. And that's always an exciting one because we see things that we normally would not see within ourselves. Hi, and welcome back to my series on what is NLP. My name is Megan. I'm a certified NLP practitioner and transformational coach. And if you are new to the video series, you're actually going to want to click up here and go back to the beginning, to the intro, and watch the first 3 videos talking about NLP. So, welcome to video 4. We've spent 3 videos now talking about literally tip of the iceberg, what NLP is. But today we're going to discuss, now that we have a little understanding of what NLP is, what are the techniques and skills that we learn and use in coaching to get you to your desired state and your desired goals. So we have a lot of fun techniques and a lot of skills that you will learn in coaching that you can actually use yourself as well once you've learned them. So just today we're going to touch upon a few of those. First is anchors. Anchors are huge, and you've actually probably know exactly what an anchor is. If you've ever seen a video of Tony Robbins when he's got hundreds of people in a stadium or thousands of people and they're all doing this or this, that is essentially an anchor. An anchor is simply a motion that gets you into a remembered state, usually obviously a positive state of where you want to be or a feeling that you want to have. So that emotion or that state might be one of confidence right before you walk in before a big sales pitch, so that you know you're going to nail it. We also work in perceptual positions. And this is kind of a fun technique where you can take perhaps maybe a relationship where there's a problem and you are aware of the problem from your position, but you've not taken the perspective of that third person. So with perceptual positions, we allow you to fully associate as yourself and talk to that third party, but then you remove yourself, step into the position of that third party, and see everything from their point of view. And then the learning really comes from stepping out of both yourself and the third party and becoming a completely disinterested party who is simply watching what's happening among these two people. And that's where all the big learning and lessons come from. And that's always an exciting one because we see things that we normally would not see within ourselves. We also use something called sub-modalities. And there's a few areas of sub-modalities that we actually can work within. The first is like and dislikes. So often, a good example of this is cigarette smoking or tobacco use. You really like it, but you know that it's not good for you and you want to get rid of it. We can use a process called like to dislike to actually take that bad habit or that thing that you like so much and turn it into something that you extremely dislike so that you don't touch it again. And we also have mapping across states. And what mapping across states is taking a state of being for you that's ineffective and turning it into one that becomes effective and completely disempowering that ineffective state so that you don't return to it again. Also within sub-modalities, we have belief changes. And that's where we can take a belief that's not serving you and turning it into one that does serve you. We also have another technique called swish patterns, which I like to say because it's simply fun to say swish when we're doing it. But again, this works with states usually. It's taking you from the ineffective state that you're currently in that you don't want to be in and turning it into a more positive state to move you into a compelling future. We also have something called physiology of excellence. And honestly, it's exactly what it sounds like. Again, going back to Tony Robbins, when you see people in that stadium that he's talking to and they're doing this or something else along that nature, it's something called a power move. And so physiology of excellence is exactly that. It's a movement to get you into a state of being of complete excellence. It's calling upon your previous successes at just that fast to get you back into that feeling in that state so that you can do whatever it is that you need to complete in that moment. We can also elicit strategies. And what I mean by that is we all have strategies for the different things we do in our life, whether it's a learning strategy, a buying strategy, a selling strategy. And so we discover what those strategies are. We make those strategies more effective for you, or we can install a completely new strategy if you're lacking one. We also do something called reframing, and I love reframing. I think my husband doesn't like it so much when I do it to him in the moment, although later on he does appreciate it. But reframing is great to get you out of a negative state, and it gets you out of it very, very quickly, simply by looking at your language, your body posture, and seeing how it's affecting you in your current state. We also do something called parts integration, and parts integration is really interesting. We all have different, and this usually is where our limiting beliefs come from. We usually have a small part of us that is not congruent with the rest of our whole. And so through parts integration, we can take that small part, bring it into the whole of our being, and become one again. And a great example of this is that I'm currently working on, I think I mentioned this in a previous video, is I have a certain amount of a goal for money that I want to earn this year. There's a small part of me that isn't quite on board with that. So my mentor has been working with me to integrate that into my whole so that I am completely congruent and can hit my goal and easily surpass it. So that's what parts integration is. It's taking the separate parts of ourselves, bringing them together so that we are congruent. Because when we're not congruent, we simply can't achieve our goals. There's also a whole nother series of NLP called quantum time techniques. And quantum time is really interesting. This dates back before AD. I believe it was Aristotle actually who was the first documented person to work with people's timelines. But what the idea is everyone has a timeline. It's how you store memories and information or how you goal set. So what we do is we discover how you organize your timeline, and then with things like negative emotion, releasing negative emotions, we can go back in your timeline, discover when that first negative emotion, whether it be hurt, guilt, sadness, anger, whatever that negative emotion is, we can go back to the first instance of that in your timeline, work on that specific instance, and by releasing the negative emotion in the timeline, it releases that negative emotion throughout the rest up to the present. So that's a very interesting, fun technique that I like to do. With quantum time, we can also use that to release limiting beliefs as well and limiting decisions, which are in fact different, but we'll get into that in coaching. So also with quantum time, this is where we really get into the heart and soul of NLP, which a lot of other therapies focus in your past. And obviously, as I've mentioned, we do some work in your past with NLP to discover your limiting beliefs and decisions and negative emotions and negative states. But for the majority of NLP, we actually want to work in your future. And this is where we do the goal setting and future pacing, and we can do all of this within your timeline. Now, of course, I'm sure you know all the different techniques and strategies of setting a SMART goal or smarter goal or whatever, book you've read. And we do that, and we've actually got some additional techniques to add into that. But then we have a very specific way of placing that goal and the emotions associated with your goal into your timeline. And it's always really interesting that when you set that date in your timeline and you actually associate into that moment, and then you actually arrive at that moment in the future and you've hit your goal, it's a pretty amazing feeling. Lastly, we actually can use hypnosis. Now, before you start freaking out about hypnosis, I'm sure you, like myself, had the wrong image of what hypnosis actually is. Most of us probably imagine the stage show, people quacking like ducks and barking like dogs and doing all kinds of crazy things. That is one form of hypnosis, yes. But for the most part, hypnosis is simply meditation. It's putting you into a relaxed state, helping you get into that state again for goal setting or to install suggestions. But again, hypnosis is very much you are in control, and we use it only a small portion of NLP. So those are the main techniques that we use in coaching. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. In the next, we're actually going to talk about what NLP is not. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Please leave me any comments or questions, and I will see you in the next video.